walked over to him and I said, gentlemen, there's been a report that somebody at this table is holding some white powder believed to be cocaine in their pocket. Now, I want all three of you to get up on the wall, spread them, and don't cause a scene. And they're looking at me with these wide eyes, and I start smiling. And they're like, "Oh, you got to be Murph."
There's a lot of things that happened in that first episode that kind of built up the series, right? So I'm curious which part of this was true and which part of it wasn't, because I'm sure you get asked this all the time. So let me see. I had some questions. So first, accuracy questions. His wife was actually like underage, Pablo Escobar's.
Absolutely, she's got a book out, and she
She
wrote.
does.
Yeah, it's well, what's the name of it?
Doesn't matter. I'm sure it's
Yeah, I read it, and she admits. I mean, she says this at the end of the book, and the book is, in my opinion, her book is mostly about poor, pitiful me. I had this glamorous lifestyle. I didn't know Pablo was a cocaine trafficker. In law enforcement,
yes.
term for that it's called bullshit.
Right.
And now all of a sudden he's dead, and I've got all these billions of dollars, and I negotiated an agreement with the Cali cartel, and I lost
Oh
most of
God.
it. But you know what? They're not starving. They're still living in wonderful places. They moved to Argentina. You don't do that if you don't have money.
Right.
So anyway, at the end of the book, she admits that when they got married, I think he was 25, 26, that she was 13, and she admits that she had an abortion at 13 because he got her pregnant when she was 12. So on
Jesus
top of being a
Christ.
mass murderer, the world's first narco terrorist, the world's most wanted criminal, he's a pedophile.
Right.
Nothing glorious about I we get I get hate mail all the time on social media about, pro Pablo, anti police. And I'm
Pro Pablo.
thinking,
That's a weird.
yeah, I'm thinking most of you guys that are sending me that information, you probably weren't even alive when he
Right.
was killed in December 1993. You don't know. Go talk to the families in Colombia
Sure.
that had members that were just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, that were killed by indiscriminately by a car bomb, or who were murdered because of whatever reason Pablo decided to kill them. Talk to those people, because almost every place that Javier and I speak, there's a Colombian in the audience. I spoke at I'm really honored that I got this opportunity. I got to speak at the Big Brothers Big Sisters National Conference just a few weeks ago up in Indianapolis.
Right.
Told him a little bit about the Escobar story, and then there was another lady there, Julie Redkay, who just has a phenomenal story. I'm so proud of her. It's the first
Julie.
time she ever told her
Maybe
story.
maybe get her on the pod.
Oh, she's fantastic.
That
And
sounds like
I'll
a really, yeah.
put you in contact if you want to talk to her.
Absolutely, yeah.
And and so at the end of this, Javier and I always make a point of saying Colombia is a beautiful country. We don't mean to portray it in a horrible light. It's so much better than it was back then. And almost every audience, somebody will come up afterwards, and it even happened in Indianapolis. Somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, I'm Colombian." I'm like, "Oh, great. Where are you from?" You talk a little bit. And they said, "Listen, I just want to say thank you for what you did for my country." Those are the people that know what the hell really happened down there, not these people that send me the hate mail that want to cut my
Right.
off and shit down my throat and things like that.
Right. It's very odd, because in one sense, I can see what the show kind of did. It made him a cool villain.
Mhm.
And in order to do that, you have to leave that kind of detail a little bit under the radar, right? Is that the reason why they would do that?
Well, what we like to say is Hollywood will never let the truth get in the way of telling a good story.
Right. That's a great expression.
And so back to your original question, for the first 2 seasons, which is about Escobar and Javier and I, about a third of what you see is actually true. Those events
Right.
happen, they're depicted correctly. The second third, well, those events happen, but they're not depicted correctly. They've been dramatized. There's a lot of violence that's been added, but it just makes for an exciting program, right? And
Sure.
then the last third is just straight up make believe Hollywood. Javier and I weren't running across those rooftops and running gun battles without the Colombian National Police. We always had the police with.
Right.
My cat was not sacrificed on my door. I've never been
Right. Thank
kidnapped.
God.
It's just there's I love the writers. Some of those guys we stayed in touch with, but there's some sick puppies out in Hollywood. I'll tell
Right. How do you feel in general about your life being this dramatized story? Did you have different feelings as, you were starting to see the final product and maybe what you thought was going to be at the start, and then it finally, it turned into this massive cult classic, and,
you.
you've got all this beautiful stuff that came with it, tours, a book, well, actually you wrote the book beforehand, right?
No, the
No,
book.
the book was after the show.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So you got all these things that are kind of, really cool that you get to tell your side of the story. But is there any like weird feeling there about how the final product?
Yeah, initially, a friend of mine in Washington D.C. introduced me to 2 producers. I met them, and they wanted to take our story and create this political right wing, left wing thing, and that's, Javier and I, we didn't think anybody wanted to hear our story anyway.
Right,
So we turned them both down and just said, because you get your hopes up and you just say, "Screw this, I'm not gonna, we're not gonna do this anymore." And then I get a call from a retired U.S. Marine that we'd worked with in Colombia, and I'd talked to this guy in over 20 years, Gil Macklin. And he said, yeah, after we caught up in our conversation, he said, "Listen, there's a producer in Hollywood who wants to talk to you." And I said, Gil, thanks, brother, but we've been down this road before and never works out, so we're not interested.
right.
And I don't know if you know any U.S. Marines, but they can be a little bit colorful in their language. He's like, "You MFer, I haven't talked to you in 20 freaking years," and and he just,
Right.
I'm like, "Okay, okay, I'll call." And so I called this guy named Eric Newman, and Eric is the creator of the entire Narcos concept. He's the executive producer. He's the man. So I called him, and he was very gracious on the phone. And he kind of gave me a spiel, and I said, "You know what? Thanks, but no thanks." And I know he about fell out of his chair because people will sell their souls to be in Hollywood. I tell you, to be on
Right.
TV.
Was there a massive lump sum of money that was being offered as well, or was
Oh
that
no,
something that didn't bother to you?
no. Well, I mean, if I'm Javier and I both were coming up on our retirement ages. We
Right.
had been promoted to the highest ranks within DE. It's called Senior Executive Service. It has to be approved by the Attorney General. Um, in federal law enforcement in the U.S., you have to retire. Mandatory retirement is 57. We were both 56. Well, I had 2 daughters in college at the time, and our administrator had the authority to grant us 3-year extensions, and she had already asked us both, offered, and we'd both accepted. So, um, if in federal service, you cannot make money on the side. You can't have a side job.
Oh, interesting.
So if we're gonna do this, that means we gotta retire.
Right.
Which, I mean, we had pretty decent salaries back then, and I got 2 daughters in college, so I needed the income.
Right.
So, Eric, after I turned him down, he said, "Listen, in a couple weeks, I'm gonna be in DC with a couple writers on some other business. Would you mind having dinner with us? Let us give you our ideas." Excuse me. "And if you say no, it's no, but at least give us an opportunity to give you,
To pitch it to you, right.
give us an opportunity." I said, "Sure," 'cause and this is the truth. I'm thinking, "That's gonna be a free dinner at a really good restaurant." And it was.
Oh, that's great.
So, and you can tell I'm a little bit silly. I like to have fun in life, so when I came in the restaurant, I guess through investigative skills, I don't know, 38 years as a cop, I can pick people out. And so
Right, the bullshitters.
I walked over to them and I said, "Gentlemen, there's been a report that somebody at this table is holding some white powder believed to be cocaine in their pocket. Now, I want all 3 of you to get up on the wall, spread them, and don't cause a scene." And they're looking at me with these wide eyes, and I started smiling, and they're like, "Oh, you gotta be Murph," and it was funny, and it kind of broke the ice, and we had a really good dinner.
Yeah.
And they gave me their spiel, and at the end of the night, he said, "Eric, so what are you gonna do now?" And I said, "Well, I'll talk to Javier. I mean, this sounds promising, but let me talk to Javier, and we'll decide." And he when we walked out the door, he said, "Let me ask you one more question. Why are you guys so hesitant to tell your story?" And I told him, I said, "Eric, the last thing we want anybody to ever do is glorify this mass murderer, the world's first
Right.
narco terrorist, Pablo Escobar." And he said, at that night, he said, "I promise you right now, that will never happen in our series." In our opinion, he's lived up to his word. So that's how it
Yeah.
all came about. That was March of 2013. By May, we had signed contracts with it's we say Netflix, but it really was Gaumont International Television.
Right.
In June, at the end of June that year, I pulled the pin and retired from law enforcement. And in July, Howard and I were sitting in the writer's room in Hollywood starting to write the Narcos series.
Wow, that's incredible.
Now, you talk about the money. I'll just tell you, we were paid consultants for 2 years. For the money they paid us each year in conjunction with my DEA retirement, my government retirement, I made more as a working agent. So everybody thinks,
Oh, interesting. I did not expect that. That was a twist there at the end.
yeah, no, it's not what everybody thinks, but like you said, what it did for us is Narcos came out
Sure.
and was such a hit that it really kicked off our speaking business, and so now here we are in our 7th year of traveling around the world.